Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This happened in high school around 12 years ago. There was a girl, we will call her Alex, who used to bully me non-stop. Alex and I were actually friends in elementary school, but out of the blue, she decided she was too cool for me. So she felt the need to bully me. She used to whip coins at me on a bus, leaving me with little welts. She'd have her male friends call me and ask me out as a joke, and she'd point and laugh at me in the hallway, which I thought only happened in movies because honestly, that one was pathetic. She made my life absolutely miserable. High school comes around and guess who has to sit next to her in Spanish class? Well, me. And guess who sat behind us? Her two best friends. I felt so small and invisible. She even had her friends pick on me, throwing spitballs or ripping the pins out of my hair and throwing them across the room, giving me crazy hair. I got so fed up but was too shy to speak up. The teacher had us do a group project, and she picked teams of 4. So you worked with whoever sat near you. Of course, I had to work with her and her two best friends. I tried asking them for help and they would stare at me and continue their conversations with each other. So I had to do the entire project by myself. I remember looking over at my teacher and I could see the empathy in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. It was a major project, but we had to come up with some script in Spanish, and all of us had to speak in front of the whole class. So I wrote the whole thing. I basically made her lines make no sense and I didn't follow any of the rules for her. We had to use certain words and tenses, and I didn't include any of that. In the middle of her speaking, I think she realized what I had done, but she was in too deep to stop. The teacher raised her voice at Alex and I don't remember exactly what she said, but her tone definitely implied that Alex was an idiot and that she could expect a terrible grade. The best part was a public humiliation in front of the whole class, and there were definitely some snickers across the room. This part is just an added bonus, but I haven't thought of Alex in so long until now. I decided to look her up on social media and she posts this lavish life on the beach all the time, with her expensive Jeep and Louis Vuitton bags. Then I googled her name and there are public records of her getting sued multiple times because she can't pay her bills, credit card companies, apartment complexes, and so on. So it gives me a chuckle knowing her whole life is just for show, and she can't actually afford her rent. No hate to anyone that's struggling financially, but when you're buying designer items, maybe, just maybe, worry about paying your bills first. Backstory. My name is Lily, and it's been a year since my world turned upside down. I used to be a typical 14-year-old girl, full of energy and dreams, but now I find myself confined to this wheelchair. Let me take you back to the day everything changed. It all started innocently enough. I was an avid soccer player, spending hours on the field chasing after the ball with my friends. We had dreams of winning championships and maybe even playing professionally one day. That is until I started feeling an unusual fatigue and weakness in my legs. At first, I thought it was just from a particularly intense practice, but the sensation persisted. Soon, even walking short distances became a struggle. My parents, worried about my well-being, took me to countless doctors, hoping for a simple explanation. After numerous tests and consultations, the verdict came in. I was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's an autoimmune condition where the immune system mistakenly attacks the nerves, causing weakness and, in severe cases, paralysis. In my case, the progression was swift, leaving me unable to walk within a matter of weeks. I remember the day I received the news vividly, sitting in a doctor's office. I couldn't fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. My parents were devastated and I felt like my entire world had crumbled beneath me. As my condition worsened, I found myself relying on crutches, then a walker, and finally the inevitable wheelchair. Each step of the way, I faced physical and emotional challenges that tested my strengths and mental health. It wasn't just about the loss of mobility. It was about adapting to a new reality and coming to terms with a life I never expected. Now the story. It all started one day after my dad had taken me out for a stroll in my wheelchair. We were enjoying the fresh air and the sense of normalcy that a walk in a park brought to our lives. As we strolled along the path, I heard an entitled voice approaching from behind. "Excuse me." The woman, who we later named Karen, huffed impatiently. She pushed her way past other park-goers, completely ignoring the basic courtesy of waiting her turn. My dad and I shifted to the side to let her pass, but that wasn't enough for Karen. She forcefully shoved my dad aside, causing him to stumble, and then rammed into the back of my wheelchair. The impact was sudden, and I found myself toppling out of my wheelchair, scraping my knees on the unforgiving pavement. As I struggled to gather myself, Karen sneered down at me. "Disabled people should stay out of the way. You ruin everything for the rest of us." Her words cut deep, adding insult to the physical injury I had just endured. My dad, looking furious, stood up and confronted Karen. "You have no right to treat my daughter like that. Show some decency." Karen decided to double down on her cruelty. She lunged at my dad, thinking she could intimidate him into silence. However, she had underestimated the protective instinct of a parent. Just as Karen raised her hand to strike my dad, a sudden force intervened. My mom, who had been nearby buying something. She stepped in like a fierce mama bear protecting her cub. Without hesitation, she delivered a powerful punch to Karen's face, leaving her stunned and bloodied. The park fell silent for a moment as onlookers processed the unexpected punch. My mom, however, wasn't finished. She stood tall, ready to defend her family. "I dare you to come near my daughter again." As the shock wore off, clearly someone in the crowd dialed 911, and soon the park was filled with the police sirens. The officers arrived, took statements from witnesses, and assessed the situation. Karen, now nursing a bloody, broken nose, was escorted into the back of a police car after my family made it clear that pressing charges was non-negotiable. Sadly, my story doesn't end here. A week or so passed from the Karen incident, and one night, it was well past midnight when we were startled awake by the sharp sound of our car alarm blaring. Panicked, we rushed to the window and saw the silhouette of a figure near our driveway. A teenage boy, it seemed, face hidden under a hoodie, was frantically slashing our car tires with a malicious determination. Fear gripped us as we fumbled for the phone to dial 911. Meanwhile, the assailant quickly moved to our mailbox before we could react. He doused it in gasoline and set it ablaze. The fire department was soon on the scene, managing to contain the blaze before it could spread further, leaving behind a fully burned mailbox and scorched bushes. The next morning, we found ourselves facing a new wave of adversity. The community was in shock as a brazen act of vandalism, and the police were keen on bringing the perpetrator to justice. Security footage from neighboring homes was examined, and it didn't take long for them to identify the teenager responsible for the attack. It turns out, it was Karen's son, likely seeking revenge for locking his beloved mother behind bars. An arrest warrant was issued and the search for him intensified. As days turned into weeks, the authorities eventually tracked him down and arrested him. Eventually, he stood before a court of law and the prosecution presented evidence of the teen's destructive retaliation, and the judge, unmoved by any potential sympathy, delivered a stern sentence. Karen's son was to spend time in a juvenile detention center. Like mother, like son, I guess. Hi everyone, I just need to get this off my chest. So, I, 25 female, got married to my high school sweetheart 3 years ago. But we recently welcomed our adorable little one into the world. Now, my husband and I decided to keep the baby's name a secret until the birth, just to make it a sweet surprise for everyone. Now here's where it gets interesting. My stepsister was also pregnant around the same time. Coincidence, right? We both had similar names in mind, but nothing too identical. I liked Mary Kay and she liked Mary Grace. Similar vibes, but not the same. Well, my stepsister decided on a name first, which was perfectly fine by me. We were cool with it because, hey, family matters more than names. But then things took a wild turn. So our little one arrived and we happily announced her name, Mary Kay. It was a joyful moment for us, but guess what? My stepsister called us up. Let's just say she wasn't too thrilled. And the conversation went something like this. Stepsister angry, are you serious right now? Mary Kay? That's the name I wanted. Me confused. But you chose Mary Grace, right? They are not exactly the same. It's practically the same thing. You're disrespecting me, knowing that I picked that name first. Well, they are different names, and we really like Mary Kay. It's not meant to upset you. Well, it does upset me. Now I have to pick a new name, and it's all your fault. How was that she hung up? Now, I'm no expert, but I thought names were supposed to bring joy, not drama. A little while later, my stepmom called. Brace yourselves. She says in an accusatory tone, I can't believe you guys did that. It's so childish. What's childish? Keeping the name a secret just so you could have your way. And you know Mary Grace was the name I wanted after my grandmother's death. Me, genuinely surprised. Wait, what? We had no idea. We just thought it would be a nice surprise for everyone. Well, it wasn't nice at all. Now your stepsister is upset, and we're all disappointed. But the names are different. Mary Kay and Mary Grace aren't the same. Whatever, just know that you upset your stepsister, and that's on you. And just like that, my peaceful post-baby glow turned into a whirlwind of family drama. Now, I can't help but wonder, am I the jerk here? We thought we were doing something sweet by keeping the name a secret, but it turned into a whole ordeal. Are we the bad guys here, or is this just a case of family dynamics gone haywire? Let me take you back a bit. My husband and I have known each other since high school. We've been through thick and thin together, so when we found out we were expecting, it was a joyous occasion for us. We decided to keep the baby's name under wraps because, well, it seemed like a cute idea at the time. Fast forward to the big reveal and things went south. I understand the importance of names, and if we had intentionally chosen something identical to my stepsister's choice, I will get the upset reaction. But Mary Kay and Mary Grace aren't identical, right? It's not like we stole the name she had in mind. In the midst of all this drama, I couldn't help but reflect on how something as simple as a name could cause so much chaos. It's a name for crying out loud. We didn't choose it to spite anyone, we chose it because it felt right for our little one. Now here I am wondering if I unintentionally turned into the villain in my own family story. Just hope this blows over soon because the last thing I want is for our baby's arrival to be overshadowed by a name dispute. To everyone out there, take a listen from my story. Names might seem harmless, but in the world of family dynamics, they can stir up a storm. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, people who keep the name selected secret until the child is born typically do so for fear of someone else using it. While the name you chose is not exactly the same as the one your stepsister told you she selected for her child, it's so damn close that it's nearly identical. While no one owns a name and you can name your baby anything you want, you're the reason people keep the chosen name secret. You are the jerk. Another commenter adds, leaning towards you're the jerk here. You know, it was her chosen name and you said she was using the name to honor her late grandmother. She certainly doesn't own the name, but if she'd made it known she had chosen the name for sentimental/family reason, then you were very sly. You kept your baby name a secret on purpose cause you knew what you were doing was wrong. The third commenter goes with, you're the jerk. It is very hidden, but not only did your stepsister pick the name first, it sounds like it's after a dead grandmother, so she had particular reasons to want that name. It's not just a name she liked. Yes, she doesn't own the name and the names are slightly different but similar enough to not want two cousins to both have those names, but couldn't you have picked something else to be kind? This is my revenge or maybe karma story. It goes back to the 1970s but just ended a few years ago. And it makes me smile every time I drive past a particular piece of property knowing the city screwed themselves. My wife and I purchased a 1.5-acre bare corner lot for $7,500 in a second-tier suburb gravel road on one side, asphalt county road on the other. The intentions were to build our first house in 4 or 5 years after saving up enough money to afford it. The planning and zoning people we talked to before purchasing the lot assured us the roads wouldn't be improved, to use their exact words, in our lifetime. Lo and behold, 4 years later we are assessed $45,000 because a housing developer purchased all the land around us to build a huge housing subdivision. I am unsure how many lots, but well over 100. With that kind of density, curb, gutters, sewer, water, and paving were required, so the developer pushed through the planning commission and the city council a project to get this done, with each property owner assessing their portion based on frontage. Since ours was a corner lot, we got hit twice, assessed per lineal frontage foot for each of the two sides of the lot. To make matters worse, after the city took land easements from us, required to widen the road and install the improvements, our lot size was reduced by almost half an acre. When they presented the easement paperwork for signature, I took it to an attorney to review, and his first question was how much they were offering in compensation. They offered nothing. They were hoping the whole process would just proceed without the issue of payment coming up. When confronted with this omission, the city's reply was, "We don't usually pay for these easements. Your neighbors didn't ask for payment. My neighbors were also not assessed nearly as much as me, and to the best of my knowledge didn't hire a lawyer to review the paperwork." To make a long story short, I ended up negotiating a $4,500 payment. But there is more. My lawyer also said real estate cannot be assessed, no matter how much it cost the city, for more than the increased market value of the lots after the assessment. So, we sued. After several attempts to sell the lot for $45,000 with no takers, it was appraised at a substantially lower value and we won a settlement from the city, reducing the assessment to only $13,500. But there's still more. Remember, this all happened in the 1970s, and the amounts will be more than triple in today's dollars. To recoup some of the costs, I presented the development plan to the city council to put 6 small rental units, attached row houses on a property, because the existing R1 single-family zoning wasn't feasible anymore, and it was now on a corner with higher traffic. My proposal was shut down on multiple occasions, ever after revisions were made at the request of the city planner to bring everything within zoning ordinances. It turns out the planning commission and the city council resented having to pay for the easement several years back, and that there was a domino effect. When the neighbors heard the city paid me, they also wanted to be paid. Several attempts were also made to give the lot rezoned commercial to build a gas station, fast food restaurant or similar business, but they were all shut down. I ended up donating the lot to a nonprofit that builds houses for the homeless, similar to Habitat for Humanity. A very generous market value appraisal gave me a huge income tax deduction, allowing me to almost break even. Now, the rest of the story. The organization the lot was donated to went bankrupt. I know this because the city started to come after me for unpaid property taxes on a land in the early 1980s, until it was proven to them title to the lot was transferred to the nonprofit several years previously. The lot stood vacant for 40 years, being maintained by the city. We still live in a neighborhood, and I chuckled over the years every time I drove by it with the family. 2 years ago, I noticed the city finally sold it. What appears to be a 4-unit residential building was constructed. The revenge/karma. The 6 small rental units I wanted to build 40 plus years ago would have been valued at the time at $500,000. Had the city allowed construction when first requested in the late 1970s, the 6 units would have an assessed/market value today of $1.5 million. Based on a market value of similar units in the area. 6 units at $250,000 each, actually on a low side, was an average assessed value over 40 years of $1 million and a 1.32% average property tax rate. The city lost $528,000 in tax revenue because the city council didn't want to pay me $4,500. I just received my last payment from this event, so I figured it was time to share the whole saga. Grab a drink and sit back, relax, and let me take you on this wild journey that all began. A long time ago and not far down the street from here, my girlfriends and I were cruising up and down the main thoroughfare of our city as teenagers that have just gotten their first cars tend to do. This is the main drag through the heart of our city, and it's where everyone would race on Friday and Saturday nights. Kill time cruising before a movie, just hang out and be seen. We're driving along on a beautiful Friday afternoon when from the back seat I spot a horde of teenage boys in a parking lot waiting for traffic to clear so they can race. They have parked their crotch rockets and cars like they are for sale, every door open, hoods up, underglow shining, speakers blasting, and so on. And like half of these guys have their shirts off. Being a red-blooded teenage girl, I shout, "Oh my god, Kristen, look!" But Kristen was driving the car. To this day, we both try to take the blame for this because I should not have shouted for her to look, and she should not have turned around to look. So of course, we rear-ended the car in front of us at about 15 miles per hour. Not bad at all. We got out, Kristen and Sarah called their moms from the parking lot, and I called the police while checking on the people in the other car. The passenger jumped out and pointed at me, told me to stay away, then went to the payphone. Yes, this happened that long ago. It was at the fast food joint we were in front of. I peeked into the car to ask the driver if they are okay, and she was leaning all the way back in her seat. She wouldn't look at me, but she said she couldn't feel her arms. So I'm like, oh no. Hey, dispatch, send me an ambulance too. This lady says she can't feel her arms. And then I started to freak out. Did we just paralyze some poor woman because we're dumb, hormonal, carefree girls? Oh god, we just ruined somebody's life. I'm asking the driver if there is anything I can do. I think I actually asked if I could make her more comfortable. I panicked and just repeated to the dispatcher at that point, "Don't worry, the ambulance will be here soon." And then she turned her head towards me and asked me who hit her. I was confused and asked her what she meant. She wanted to know which one of us was driving, but I didn't want to tell her for some reason. I was just like, no, don't worry about that, you'll be fine. And she wasn't having it. She got pissed and she started screaming at me to tell her who was driving. So I just screamed back that she was crazy and I wasn't going to tell her anything. And then the dispatcher says, "Miss, please just back away from the vehicle." Swear to God, that dispatcher was psychic or something because I ducked out of the car right as the driver swung her meaty fist at my head. And then it was on. She ripped off her seatbelt, not paralyzed after all, and she lunged out of the car running around the rear end to come at me. So I ran screaming around the front end. Straight out of a cartoon, she turned around and ran around the other side of the car, making me turn around to run the opposite way, back and forth around the front and back of the car until she committed to a side, and I just ran the other way to the parking lot. Kristen was banging on the door of the fast food joint, but an employee was holding the door closed and shaking her head. I will never forget that poor woman's face. Sarah was on the phone crying, and I could hear the sirens in the distance, and dispatch was entirely too calm asking me to explain the problem. On the 911 recording, you can just hear me panting, "What the heck? What the heck? What the heck?" was every exhale. You guys, this woman was short, stout, and she ran like a juiced up bull. She was so fast, I could feel her catching up to me, so I pivoted to the side, and she whooshed past me. And she continued right towards Sarah, clotheslined her as she ran by, and headed to Kristen, who at this point had seen the writing on a wall and was running away. But there wasn't really anywhere to go except the entrance of the drive-thru. So Kristen and the enraged driver disappeared around the back of the building, and I was picking Sarah up off the ground when an ambulance, fire truck, and 2 police cruisers pulled up. EMT popped up first, but we ran at him screaming nonsense about a crazy lady in the drive-thru. And then Kristen came flying around the far corner of the building with beast mode right on her heels. I've never seen somebody stop so fast. She came out around the corner, saw all the emergency responders, stopped and dropped like a felled tree before pretending to shake uncontrollably. This lady tried to pull a fake seizure right in front of the EMTs and police. Her friend, the passenger who had been on a payphone this whole time, dropped down next to her and started wailing that somebody needed to do something and help her and arrest us. Really coming hard was a dramatics. So the EMTs loaded her up and they went off to the hospital while the three of us gave our statements to the police. We assumed that was the end of it. Insurance was supposed to deal with anything else, right? First, the driver tried to sue all three of us and the insurance company. Pain, suffering, medical bills, loss of income, the whole works. She claimed that after rear-ending her, I dragged her out of her car and Kristen was actually chasing her through the drive-thru. The 911 recording disproved her claim of being pulled from the vehicle, and the CCTV footage from the fast food restaurant showed her as a pursuer. The suit was eventually dismissed and she had to pay our lawyer's fees, which really sucked for her because Sarah's lawyer got photos of her frolicking at a music festival when she was supposedly suffering from whiplash, double knee injuries, and constant dizziness. Boom! That's insurance fraud. She spent a year in jail and paid a hefty fine. We assumed that was the end of it. But no. A few months after she was released, we all began to find dead animals left on our front porches, in our mailboxes, in the swimming pool, hung over the side mirror of the car, and so on. Definitely some unusual places to find dead animals. The phone calls started, hang-ups, faxes, random screaming. Kristen wrote that she saw a car following her between school and a coffee house. Sarah thought she saw a similar car in her neighborhood a few times. We all knew who was doing it, but the cops couldn't really do anything without proof. Our parents were pissed because this was the dawn of the digital era and we all had cell phones. But the crazy lady was blowing up the landline and it was harassing our parents more than us. And the dead animals were terrifying our siblings. So Kristen's mom bought a guard dog, and the next time somebody dropped a dead raccoon in their Porsche, Duke was gonna give them what they came for. So everyone in Kristen's house was sitting back enjoying a little TV one night when a noise was heard in the bushes right before a dead squirrel was hurled through the open window. And Duke leapt right out the window and tackled the crazy driver lady. She was dressed in all black, ski mask, gloves, and everything. Literally the uniform of the nefarious. Kristen said Duke had her whole shoulder and his big mouse that was pinning her down, while they called the police. She was hauled off to jail while the cops searched her car found down the road. They found meth, stolen credit cards, pills, a knife, trash bags, and cleaning supplies. To get her to plead to a whole slew of lesser charges, the prosecutor threatened to pursue kidnapping charges, even though it was a real stretch. She ended up being sentenced to 5 years in prison, and she served 3. Thankfully, none of us have heard from her ever since. 3.5 years ago, I made an appointment to get new prescriptions for 3 medications I've been taking and only got one of them filled at the appointment. Dr. Entitled took my blood pressure and weight and wrote one of the prescriptions I needed for blood pressure medication. I asked her for prescriptions for the other 2 meds, but she spent most of the 15 minutes allotted for the prescription appointment talking about weight loss and not about my other 2 medications. While I understood I needed to lose a few pounds, I couldn't be as physically active as I'd like because of knee pain. And the 15-minute medication appointment was not the appropriate time for a weight loss discussion. Bipolar disorder has nothing to do with my weight. If you can't try these other 2 prescriptions, could you at least refer me to someone who can? I asked her. If you lose weight, it will help your mood. She refused to refer me to another provider for the other 2 medications, a mood stabilizer and an antidepressant. I walked out of Dr. Entitled's office with only 1 prescription, and I ended up feeling like I wasted my time. Travel time to the clinic, plus time in a waiting room, plus time in a doctor's office, plus time in the pharmacy. That all equals 3 hours spent to get only 1 prescription filled. I ended up going to a walk-in clinic at the county hospital to get the other 2 meds. The next day, I called Dr. Entitled's office to let her know that I was firing her and my insurance provider, to explain the reason for my self-referral to the county hospital. We are very sorry this happened. You acted appropriately and you absolutely can switch to another doctor. The insurance provider reassured me, so I did. But of course, you know the story doesn't end there. A couple of days after I fired Dr. Entitled, I got a text from mom saying, "Dr. Entitled called. She wants you to come back in and see her." How about no? I was livid, and frankly creeped out that she had called my mother. Mom was my emergency contact, but Dr. Entitled getting angry over being fired was not an emergency. I got phone calls and emails from Dr. Entitled's office for months telling me to come back in for a visit. Each time I would reply that I'd fired her and changed doctors. It took the threat of an anti-harassment order to get her to leave me alone. Meanwhile, I met Dr. Awesome, and after my very first visit with him, I had referrals for knee x-rays and physical therapy for what turned out to be severe osteoarthritis. About 2.5 months ago, my older cousin, 27 female, and her partner, 25 male, moved into my house because of certain circumstances. I happily accepted them into my home because me and her were always close growing up. I'm 26 years old right now and I work part-time while still making enough to pay all my bills and still have more than enough to spend on myself. My cousin, on the other hand, lost her job and her partner is still pulling the "I'm trying to work on my business" crap. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. It wasn't until full months had passed that I noticed that they weren't exactly the tidy type. I didn't have OCD or anything, so I just kindly told them to start picking up behind themselves and maybe do some chores around the house since they weren't paying rent. For the next few weeks, it was nice and they did everything I asked of them. It wasn't until the 2 months mark hit that I completely lost it. I had gone out of town for just a week to meet up with some friends for a wedding and a little time to myself. During that time, they had somehow listed my house on Airbnb and I came back to it almost completely trashed. I of course yelled at everyone involved and said some very not nice things. But can you blame me? My house was very beautiful and cost a pretty penny. The two were almost always respectful, so I'd never expected them to pull something like that. I called her mom and explained everything to her and tried my best not to just completely throw them out because I didn't want them to become homeless. I guess during my phone call she decided to make a few of her own. I had gotten some very nice and peaceful phone calls from multiple family members cussing me out and saying that my cousin had called them crying and said that I was trying to throw them out for trying to make some money. I said the F it and told her, "You have overstayed your welcome and are trying to play victim. I want you out by morning." Ever since then, I've been getting many phone calls and text messages blaming me for the whole fiasco. I don't know, am I the jerk here? And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, "You were not the jerk, they trashed your house and they are out. They should have given you the rental money for the repairs. Also, they didn't ask first because they knew they were doing the wrong thing." Another commenter adds, "Not the jerk. This sounds like a situation where you gather the list of volunteers who are willing to take them in. Send your cousin to them. They seem to be more than willing to volunteer your house as an Airbnb for your cousin's profit. Then of course, they must be also volunteering their own, no?" The third commenter goes with, "Not the jerk. They took advantage of you and then spun a sub-story to others. They should have asked first and avoided this altogether. It also sounds like they were starting to take advantage of you." Her partner saying he was working on his business. Do you know how much work he actually did, or did he say it so he didn't look bad for not looking for a job? Your heart was in the right place. I'm sorry they did this to you. I would have completely lost it in this situation as well.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.